Okay, I'm Morgan Cooper. I'm a U.S. citizen married to a Palestinian, and we're raising our two small children in Ramallah of occupied Palestine.
A U.S. citizen
So I
living in
posted
Ramallah, Palestine, bringing up your two children with your husband who's Palestinian. And my first question would be, how did you meet and how did you decide? How did you make the decision to end up living in Palestine?
So I was already here actually when I met my husband.
Okay.
I'd been coming to Palestine for 5 years at that point. I came to Palestine. I got a bachelor's degree in literature, which is pretty useless on the job market. And so I got really frustrated after graduating and was like, okay, I studied abroad in Spain and I loved being in Europe. I'm just going to go back to Europe. So I had like $1,000 saved up and I bought a ticket. And I spent a few years just kind of backpacking and working odd jobs to make money to keep going and backpacking and traveling. And eventually one of my college professors said, hey, my son is in Palestine teaching English at the Catholic school. Can you go visit him? He's not very happy. And I was like, oh, cool, new experience. And I really was so incredibly ignorant. I was just like a typical American, so ignorant of, what falafel or hummus even were, much less of the politics of what was happening here. So it was a really shocking experience for me to come the first time. And one of the things that I had said to him was I wanted a host family because that's the best way to get an education and a cultural experience. And he asked around and there was only one family, one woman, a single mom who was willing to take me home, Fidat Musa, who I just spent a lot of time with yesterday. And she became my mom. Like I literally call her in-name mom. And for the first 5 years I was in Palestine, I lived with her. And so people always think that I came to Palestine because I fell in love with a man, but I actually stayed in Palestine because I fell in love with a woman and her 3 children, eventually 4 children. And it was an amazing experience. And I think for me, I had traveled a lot, not only in Europe, and I felt this incredibly heavy responsibility going through a checkpoint. Like I am from a white settler colonial nation and I am a tax-paying American. And this was a huge wake-up call for me that this is what my tax money was paying for, was like these soldiers' shoelaces and bullets in their guns. And so seeing the injustice the very first time I crossed the checkpoint from Jerusalem to Ramallah, Palandia checkpoint, and I was just so confused by occupation and what that means. You're literally occupying civilians. And it was really in great contrast to the narratives that I had heard on Western television. So I kept coming back and visiting Fidat, living with Fidat, working here. And then eventually I decided I want to be qualified for the jobs I'm getting. So I went to occupied Hawaii and I did my graduate studies there and got my graduate degrees, and I came back and I taught at Birzeit University. And so that was the moment actually when I met my husband. He had just opened up a restaurant and I became one of his most regular customers. And it was 2 years later, I think, that we decided to marry in a really rushed moment. I was a tourist at that point and still am a tourist. My legal identity here is a tourist in Israel. That means that the Israelis who control the borders. So the Israelis control Palestinian borders. Of course, they occupy everything, literally, including the air we breathe, the water that we access, everything. And so the Israelis control the borders, and that means that any visas are issued through the Israelis. Okay, so I have a visa in my passport from the state of Israel. And it was a B2 visitor visa that's given to you at the airport or your point of entry, your port of entry. And those are usually for up to 3 months is typical, but sometimes they would give me like 1 week or 1 month. And every time I would come in, it was just this fight. And it was a lot of fear. Am I going to be able to get back in? So we just hit a point where they said, okay, this is the last time we will let you in the country. You have no business being here. You can only by law be a tourist 6 months in the year. And I was teaching at a university in Palestine, but the university itself could not even apply for me to have a work visa or a longer term visitor's visa. And this is something that the Israeli state regularly does. So like student visas to come and be a study abroad student at the university, a work visa being a visiting scholar, having a job here. Basically, any kind of visa extension is impossible if you are in occupied Palestine because the Israelis don't want anybody coming in here and seeing and experiencing, much less contributing to civil society. So I hit a point where it was really clear I had been deported once, and I was told that I wasn't going to be let back in. So I just looked at Saleh, my husband, and was like, what are we going to do if they are serious about that and they don't let me back in 2 weeks when my visa expires and I have to travel out again? And he was like, I don't know, we'll move to Amman. I was like, I don't want to live in Jordan. This is our home. This is where we live. Are you really going to move to Amman? He's like, no, I'll visit you on the weekends. I was like, what? This is a crazy solution. Let's get married. I heard that spouses can get extensions as visitors on their visitor visa. So we rushed this marriage. I think it's a really uncommon tale that you marry the Palestinian to get a visa. Most people would think that it's the opposite. You want to marry the American to get the visa and be able to travel out, but that wasn't the case for us at all. And I was able to get a 1-year extension on a visitor's visa. So my legal status is still a tourist. I'm 21 years in Palestine and I'm still a tourist, because Netanyahu himself is on record as saying that he will give the spouses, the foreign national spouses of Palestinians, Lemshema residency when he grants the right of return to Palestinian refugees, meaning never. He doesn't want, and the state of Israel doesn't want, to build up Palestinian society, which is the point of an occupation, right? You're meant to come in and like create stability and then leave. And that's who've just announced that they're planning on annexing the West Bank with Trump's support. So I'm 21 years as a tourist, but what that really means, it's not only that, my passport just came back from being extended. It's a State of Israel Hebrew B2 visa. It's 2 months and I think 3 weeks is what they gave me for my extension. Last time it was 1 month. It's a constant hassle because you have to give them your passport for a full month. And so I'm regularly without my passport in my hands. It costs a huge amount of money every time you do it. So 1 to 2 to 3 months, you're paying a lot of money to get the extension. But none of that I don't have a right as a foreign national to having residency here. I don't have a right to having a visa here. But my husband, who's a Palestinian citizen, and my children, who are Palestinians, have a right to family reunification under the Geneva Conventions. So that is their rights as Palestinians under occupation, or any occupied person. Literally thousands of human rights violations that happen on a regular basis here.
So basically, what they're telling you is that you cannot be a Palestinian in a sense, even if you've married. Because my mum's English and she's married to Cypriot. She's been living here in Cyprus for nearly 60 years now. But she can be a Cypriot. She can apply and become a Cypriot. So what they're telling you in reality is that you cannot be a Palestinian because they don't want to acknowledge that there are Palestinians anyway to begin with.
Right. They don't want to grow the population. It's a demographic issue, for one, but also that, a lot of, I think a lot of the spouses who are in my situation are major contributors here as well. Like they're university teachers, they're founders of businesses, they're on boards. And so the point is to make, I always say this at the end of videos also, the point is to make life untenable. And that's certainly what occupation has done in our family situation with just the simple thing of the legal identity, much less so many other issues. Make life untenable and encourage Palestinians to go join the diaspora and leave, because it's part of a bureaucratic approach to the ethnic cleansing that happens here. And, I'm married. In particular, my situation is a little unique because I think it's 0.8% of the population today in occupied Palestine remains Christian. And most of the Christians have immigrated out. And it's because a lot of them have family already outside, or they have the means to immigrate out. They have connections with churches. And so it's a dying community. And I think when you make life untenable and people have the means to choose a different life, they often will. A lot of people say to me constantly, well, what is my daughter who has a master's? What kind of job is she going to be able to get? Like, what kind of future do I have? One of my friends in Bethlehem was saying, I spent 8 years working to save enough money to build my home and get married next year. And all it takes is one rocket from the settlement across the hill from us, and I'm done. Like my home, my dreams, my money, everything is done. What kind of life am I raising my children in? In our case, I often think about how often school is canceled because of general strikes that are directly related to occupation and the violence of occupation. What kind of education are our kids getting when they're not going to school? And this is such a minimal it's such a minimal experience compared to what's going on in Gaza, where all the schools are bombed and there's literally no school for children for over a year.
Yeah, but still, how easy or how difficult is it for you to raise two children in Ramallah, the occupied West Bank?
Ramallah is called a bubble, and it really is in a lot of ways. But I think also it's your choice how much you want to be aware of the presence of occupation. It's like a cancer, and you can't always find where that cancer has gone in a body, but it can spread so much beyond what you can see. So I think it's a choice in Ramallah to see it, to acknowledge where it is. I mean, occupation is in Israeli produce being in our vegetable market, because Palestinian farmers cannot access the vegetable market and bring their produce here. Like 2 years ago, I remember there was a point where they said to the farmers in Gaza, okay, pick your strawberries. We give you guys military permission to bring the trucks out and sell it. They were going to bring the strawberries to the West Bank. And they made the trucks full of harvested strawberries sit in the sun for like 8 hours before all the strawberries were rotted. And this is a pretty common story to create these barriers. I mean, literally everything is controlled by occupation. So the roads, it's almost like a plumbing system in an apartment building where you could like turn off the water to one section. And that's the architecture of occupation, is that they can do the same thing with sections of, or even individual towns or cities in the West Bank of occupied Palestine. So it means that you can close economic movement of products between areas and make it impossible. So literally, that's in the vegetables of Palestine, but we live right above Mukhayam Kadura, and the military is often going in, the Israeli military, at 1, 2, 3 in the morning, driving through. They do raids. I think everybody saw what happened to the Al Jazeera offices here.
Yeah.
The Hisbeh, the vegetable market, they literally came in, the Israelis, and they started a fire after going after a money changer shop. And then they sat there and made sure that that fire got big enough and strong enough and devastating enough for 2 hours before they moved out, so that the Palestinian firefighters could move in and try to take care of it. And at that point, the entire vegetable market had burned down to ashes. So
I remember I saw the video that you had uploaded. I saw the video that you had uploaded.
I was going to the money changer. I was literally going to that money changer. I always walk through the Hisbeh. It's something I love in Ramallah. And I was just shocked. All of a sudden I realized that like there's a smell of smoke, and in front of me it's like all burned down, and started asking what's happened here. And it was the thing that was so shocking to me was the realization from the stories that these men were sharing that the Israelis literally just kind of stood there and made sure that that fire was really going well. And this is Ramallah. You cannot go to that market, and you cannot notice that where it's at, and you can, stay away from the areas, but it's increasingly visible. In Al Bire, which is a twins, we say Ramallah, but it's two twin towns, Ramallah and Al Bire, that kind of make up this area that has grown so much and often called Ramallah. And Al Bire has incursions all the time. I mean, I think it was 7 months ago, the Israelis came a street away from my friend's house and shot a kid who was just riding his bike. And this has become increasingly common. And you see it with Gaza too. I mean, they have this absolute disregard for life, for law, for morality. Absolute disregard. And so Ramallah is the least touched, for sure, of all of the Palestinian spaces. But it is still there. It is still visible. And my children, as well, all other children in Palestine, see that. They live.
I cannot even begin to imagine what it's like for a child to live through that. I've got my son's nearly 8 years old, and I can't even imagine what children feel going through what children in Palestine in general, let alone Gaza, but in general in Palestine. I know it's olive season now, just like in Cyprus, it's olive season, and you've been harvesting your olives.
You can tell because I keep slouching, like so tired.
Yes.
Tired of it. Yeah,
You've got neck problems. You've been harvesting your olives, and I would like you to talk to me about your project. But my question is, and we've been watching the Israeli soldiers attack Palestinians who have been harvesting their olives, destroying the trees that are 100 and 1,000 years old, and burning them, taking the Palestinian farmers' produce, their olives, taking their equipment. Have you ever thought that that could happen to you? Is that a possibility, even though you're in Ramallah?
Of course, it's a possibility. In our case, I think only over the last 12 months, we've had the Israeli military coming up to our land. And it is still Ramallah, but it doesn't mean that that can't happen. I mean, anything can happen here. They're that level of crazy and violent and vicious, and it could absolutely happen. I think it's a lot less likely to happen where we are than other places, but we're very aware. I don't know. I've been thinking this lately about, I went through a really serious health situation over the summer, and I kept thinking that I'm so grateful that we have hospitals. I'm so grateful that we had emergency rooms when I needed it, and pharmacies with medicine, and I have my home where I could rest and recover through all of this. And then I kind of get bitter and think, like, that's not something that I should have to celebrate, that my house didn't get bombed and that our hospitals didn't get bombed. It actually should just be a basic human right, as it's meant to be, that everybody has access to healthcare. And I think it's the same during the olive harvest. I keep thinking, like, well, I'm so grateful that, you know, we can harvest in peace. I'm so grateful that we can bring all of our supplies, our ladder, our tarps, our bags, and be able to leave them overnight and not have to take them back with us. I'm so grateful that we can access our land with a car. I was in Beit Igza yesterday, and I made a reel that I'll post tomorrow. Literally, there is the Israeli apartheid wall, takes different forms in different places. So in some places it is an electric fence with razor wire on top, and they have confiscated the land from the olive farmers in Beit Igza on the other side of this, even though it's like smack dab in the West Bank of occupied Palestine. And every day, those farmers have to show up around 7 o'clock with all of their equipment. I mean, you're talking about ladders and the rakes and sticks. And they have to sit there until the soldiers open. And you don't know if that's going to be at 9, at 10, at 12. And then when they open, you show them your military permit, and they only open Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 4 days a week. And as you go through, for the people who are allowed to go through and access their land and their trees and harvest, which they weren't allowed to last year, they are told at that moment, okay, you have to exit at. And they're given a time that the soldiers will open the gate for a little bit to let you back out. Otherwise, you're trapped and you've violated your.
It's basically like they're taunting the people. Like it's like holding an ant and pulling legs off it bit by bit.
It is orchestrated chaos. It's the way that they run it. The bureaucracy, it's constantly shifting how you have to apply for a permit, if there's going to be a permit, what the rules are of the permit. Everything is constantly shifting, and it's never written down. So there's no clear policies and procedures that you know how to follow. You're always just trying to get word of mouth. What was your experience? And piece it together to see how to survive in this insane machine that's constantly shifting, this matrix of occupation. And for these farmers, they are literally 4 days a week, 2 to 3 hours a day. And a lot of that is carrying all of their equipment and setting it up. How much can you harvest in 3 hours, 4 days a week? That's like a day of work on our land, because we go for a really long day. And we were able to harvest like 9 trees in that time. And you're talking about some people who have 200, 300 trees. So, you know, yes, we could experience this, but I think it's not about the imagined fear of what could happen to us. That's not where we put our energy. It's about also sharing the real, actual lived experiences that so many farmers are going through right now as they try to do something so simple and harvest their trees. And, you know, like olive oil is economically very important, but it's also a staple in Palestinian houses. And last year, these farmers from Beit Igza were not able to harvest a single tree, a single olive, a single bit of oil, that all just wasted. And that means that this year they also have like double the work of pruning the trees.
Yeah.
So how much can you harvest while you're also having to do heavy pruning and care for your trees? And after the harvest, you're meant to fertilize your trees so that they give you a good production the year after. How is any of that possible? They're not allowed to enter their vehicles. And I'm talking about one small village out of how many places face settler violence or Israeli military violence or closures, restrictions, and just accessing the land of your grandfathers, where you are stewards and meant to be caretaking for the trees.
So talk to me, I think I'll try and pronounce it correctly. It's Mashjadur.
Mashjar. Mashjar is a place of trees.
Yeah.
Mahal shajar. Judur means roots, like literal roots of a tree.
Yeah?
Yes.
Mashjar
And coastal roots as
jadur.
well. Mashjar jadur. It's hard.
Yeah. So I tried. I think I got it right. Mashchar Jatur. Yes, Jadur.
You're close. You're there.
I'm close. All right. It's the land you've got. It's a project you began. I'm assuming with your husband, Saleh.
Yes, his
Um,
vision.
yeah. And talk to me a little bit about this amazing project that you have introduced us to through your stories and through your posts on Instagram.
Well, I rather co-opted the project and the Instagram page when I just felt like I couldn't bear the rage that I felt witnessing what's happening around us. So Mashhad is a place of trees. It was my husband is from Ramallah, the founding families of the small town of Ramallah 550 years ago. And he used to put me in a taxi and we would go out to the edge of Ramallah and look at the land, and he would just pine for land and say, oh, my father's one of the only people from the families of Ramallah who didn't own land, who never bought land, who didn't inherit land. And if only I could buy 1 dunam, which is like a quarter of an acre. So after a few years of this, we pooled all of our savings pretty soon after we got married, and we bought 10 dunams. So like 2.5 acres.
Yeah.
And he wanted just to plant trees and make it an arboretum. And I was really keen on having a green space, like a conservation area where our future children and children in the city could go and learn about nature. Because for me, I've always seen that Palestinian cultural heritage, which is often celebrated, like a lot of people, even before this last year, knew what Palestinian tatriz was or what debka, the traditional dancing, is. The olive wood industry and crafts. And all of that is rooted in the Palestinian relationship to the land. Falahi, which is like peasant, farmer culture, Falahi culture, it is the root of
Yes.
Palestinian culture and identity.
It's amazing that we've got the same words in Cyprus, felachis,
Oh, yeah.
felachis, which means, exactly the same. We've got exactly the same meaning as well. So
Yeah,
we've got
it doesn't translate fantastically to English,
yeah.
but I think that is Palestinian cultural heritage at its purest. It is, for me, that's how I see it. And all of that, the cultural expression, is rooted in the relationship historically that people had as caretakers of the land, the knowledge they had around the land. And a lot of that traditional knowledge around land is being lost. So I was really keen on collecting that knowledge and then safeguarding it and sharing it from within the space of Mashhad, the land. So bringing people up, doing workshops, teaching them, sharing with them. And I wanted that for our children and our community's children as well, because it's not something that our government has created. So
And you've got handmade in Palestine as well. Yeah.
So we started the land project and we found that it was totally not fundable. Like all of the money here is for culture, but most of it is going for emergency relief or refugee relief, this kind of thing, humanitarian, medical aid. So we decided that we wanted to find a way to be more sustainable. And we put a little display in our restaurant and started selling local kafiyas and crafts. And it did okay. And after a year, I was like, hey, let's try to make a little website. And that was really challenging because also our post is occupied. So for me to ship to you in Cyprus or somebody in Europe or the States or Australia or India, I have to go to an agent here in Palestine, in Ramallah, or mine is in Silwad, and I have to give them my package, which they take to a registered DHL office in Jerusalem, and then they ship from there through Ben Gurion. So it's really expensive. Like one kofia would cost around $50 to ship. And then we face a lot of complications so that it might end up taking 3 weeks for us to get it out. And so what I decided to do was package everything up in some boxes and send it to my sister and be like, hey, can you once a week go to the post office and send out some orders? And the first year, the website sold $3,000. And I was like dancing in the restaurant. I was so excited. I was like, look what we did. And I soon found that the cost of handcrafted, fairly traded, made in Palestine, shipped with DHL to the States really ate up a lot of that profit that we thought we'd have. So we ended up having to raise prices and try to succeed in making a profit so that we could donate that profit forward to Mashhad Jadur's work. My mom took over the job of being fulfillment and gave us her spare room and was a volunteer, sometimes up to 10 hours, 12 hours a day, as we grew. And I was a volunteer for, I don't know, 8 years of Handmade Palestine. And so that we could not have these expenses and just be able to raise money. But again, we mostly just broke even or were sometimes losing money. And many times I wanted to quit. And one time I actually said this to Dalal, who does all the brass jewelry. And I was like, I can't do it. I can't keep investing in this. I know that this is an income for you, but I'm losing money and I'm too busy for this and I can't afford to keep it going. It's supposed to raise money for the land. Instead, it costs me money. And she basically put it into perspective. This was probably five years ago, like a year before COVID. And she was like, Morgan, so many women in the village are relying on this income. This is the only possible income they have. So I know you are tired, but you have to keep going. And I will help you and we will all do our best to be able to make this at least break even. And so we hit that point where, it broke even, basically, the project. So it still wasn't doing its job in raising funds for the land until last year in 2023. It's the first year that we turned a profit and we're able to donate money forward to the land, which was really amazing. So Handmade Palestine is succeeding in its original mission. But more importantly, Handmade Palestine has done an amazing job through storytelling to preserve traditional knowledge and to share that and pass that forward through social media.
One of the great assets of having social media and being on Instagram is storytelling as well. And through your posts, a lot of people that were ignorant about what is going on in Palestine, about the checkpoints, about the roadblocks, about different roads, like watching your videos, having to go to a place where you can access basically in 20 minutes, but you have to take a detour and it will take you 2 hours to get there because you have to go on a separate road, which settlers do not go on. These were things that I had touched upon in the past, but weren't aware of how embedded it is within the society. And I'm sure that a lot of people who are watching us now had no idea that this is how it works. Because obviously Israel and the Israelis and the settlers and people that we might come across in the rest of the world paint a completely different picture of what it is. And if you ever do mention the word apartheid to them, they say, no, it's all a lie. There is no apartheid. Well, evidence on the ground and what you've been showing us for the past year is just like, it's the worst apartheid. And even the South African government has said it's the worst apartheid than even South African apartheid.
Yeah, I get these comments. I've become known to the Zionists, and I get these comments from people that I just can't be bothered to respond to. I just block the haters because it's so delusional for people who have not experienced it firsthand to be arguing that, I'm a liar, that there is no apartheid, that this is not occupation, that the Israeli settlers are not violent. I mean, I'm not the only person sharing my lived experience here. So it's
Exactly.
not hard to see. I mean, the entire genocide of Gaza, the annihilation of Gaza has been broadcast for more than a year now. How can people continue to deny that? It's just mind-blowing to me. But you cannot come here and fail to experience apartheid at every step of your movement through the occupied, the West Bank of occupied Palestine.
So I have a couple of more questions before we have to go. Have you ever thought of moving out of Ramallah, of moving out of Palestine?
No. It's really bizarre to me, actually, how many people over the last year, I wasn't on social media. I always made a point of being behind the camera and uplifting Palestinian voices, always telling my husband, okay, you be in the video, even if it's in English, I don't want to be in the video. And it was my uncontrollable rage that motivated me to start speaking. And I did not ever expect that anybody would listen. Like I just was posting for myself, really, to have an outlet. And I was really surprised that the videos went viral, and embarrassed. I'm also embarrassed because it is my white privilege that allows people to hear me. It is that they can relate to my language, to the way I look, to my background and culture, and they can relate to all of that, which makes my voice valuable to them. And I find that really embarrassing that we're still, and shameful that we're still in such a racist, colonialist moment in the world. But a lot of people have responded with these comments, which I think are really well intentioned, of like, can't you get your children and get out of there? And one thing that I realize is that people don't have any sense of geography, and they confuse where we are in Ramallah, the West Bank of occupied Palestine, with Gaza and other areas. But also, like, that's the point, right? That is the Zionist end game, is to wipe this land clean from Palestinians. So if I say to my husband, I'm too terrified, I can't live here anymore, I refuse to live here anymore, I want to use my white privilege, my foreigner privilege, my passport, and I want to leave and make a life somewhere else, then they've won. They've won because they've just gotten rid of another Palestinian whose ancestors were part of founding the town and who is so committed to this land because of my fear. And I think that that's, exactly what we have to fight against. It is my responsibility to raise my children in Falahin culture and to teach them to be stewards of this land. And I have to find ways of understanding myself to be able to explain to a 4 and an 8-year-old the things that they are seeing and hearing around them, which includes, going to the Hispan, my son seeing in front of him all of that destruction and being like, Mama, where did it go? What happened here? Okay, you have to figure out, how are you now going to explain to your 8-year-old the Israelis coming in and doing this intentionally just for fun, just to devastate Palestine a bit more? I will never leave here. I did leave after October 7th. I had actually a very intense breakdown, and I did leave for a few months. And then, of course, my husband stayed, and I came back, and that's it. Like, I went to get myself, my mental health straightened out. I used, of course, my privilege, and I felt incredibly guilty about making that choice. But I was not in a place where I could function within our family. Other than that, like, we leave to travel. We went this summer to the UK. We are going for Christmas. I get to have Christmas for the first time in 20 years with my family. And that's amazing. That's part of being, this bi-national family.
Yeah.
I don't know is that a word or the word? We always say bilingual, but multicultural family, and also my husband's entire family is in the States. When he was 15, his family immigrated to the States, and he was the only one who moved back here permanently. So for us to see his family also, we have to go there. But like, to leave the land, to uproot my children, to make my children part of the diaspora, no, it's the point. And then what's left here, as Palestinians continue to immigrate out, and I truly mean this, like, to each his own. Every person needs to make the choices that are right for his family. But as Palestinians continue to immigrate out and be ethnically cleansed, like, it becomes increasingly urgent and vital that you deepen your roots in the land, and you use your voice, which, I've been off Instagram mostly for the last few months as I've gone through this health crisis. So I'm not really one to speak right now, but that you use your voice, you use your platforms, you use any means you have to continue sharing your experiences. For me, I don't speak on behalf of Palestinians. I speak about my lived experience here as the mother of these children. I mean, that's my major identity, and the wife of this man, because again, it's his vision that created Mashar Jadur and what we're doing right now as a family. And also to bring the voices of the Palestinian artisans that we work with and the farmers that we work with, and share those. And when they are afraid and refuse to be on social media, to be the person being able to share their stories as well. And that requires me to be here. So no, I never think about uprooting my family and moving somewhere else. I do hope that we get to have experiences in other countries sometimes, short term, but we will not ever be leaving this land, even if the Israelis deny me my tourist status.
Which is also a possibility.
Yeah, it's more than that.
Know with that. As a US citizen, we've just had the US elections. What is your take on that? It's just two evils, really. People were saying vote for the lesser evil, and I was like, no, vote for third party. Even though I don't live in the States, I'm not a US citizen, but whoever I spoke to that lived there, I was like, no, 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 you don't understand. It's not the lesser evil. Do you think anything will change? Will this be worse? Will Trump be worse?
I don't think from my position in occupied Palestine that it makes any difference. I think that from within occupied Palestine, US governments, US foreign policy has been very similar no matter who's in charge. Okay. And so, I mean, Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. And that was really big because it's acknowledging Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which the international community has been very against, acknowledging the illegal annexation of Jerusalem by the Israelis. So that
And
was
the
like,
Abraham Accords as well. He signed the Abraham Accords, which.
but
Yeah.
at the same time, I think there's always this race between Republicans and Democrats to show who's more Zionist.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure that that makes any difference here from within occupied Palestine. I know that for a lot of Americans, a lot of my community in the States, you know, my friends, college friends, family, people are really devastated. I don't get that. I really don't see that because from my view outside, America, the American empire has been imploding for quite a while. And the lesser of two evils is still evil. And just because within America you haven't personally felt and suffered through the policies and the consequences of American evilness, the rest of the world has. You know, the colonial powers, not only the United States, but Europe, Germany, and the UK especially, their foreign policies have made so many people in the global south, the colonized lands, suffer. They are all supporting and enacting and participating in an annihilation. I mean, I feel like there's got to be a word even beyond genocide at this point. And at some point, Americans are going to have to feel that. They are living in a bubble in the States to think that it really matters whether it's Trump or Harris. And I think that's because they are so consumed and egocentrically consumed with American liberties. But this is not all there is, and this is not all you should be voting on. And it's the two-party system is the evil. It's not just Trump and Harris. They are not the evils. They are just faces of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And this together is part of a two-party system that is America. And this is the evil. And there is not a lesser of two evils anymore when you look at it that way. There is just a system, a political system that has wreaked havoc and destruction and death around the world that needs to come down. And if Trump is part of, let me be the most unpopular American in America, if Trump is part of that downfall, then so be it. Because it's time for the fall of the American empire so that we can have a hope of saving the world before it's too late. That is how I see it.
That was my last question, but I think you've answered it. My last question was like, do you believe, and I ask most of my interviewees this final question, do you believe that what we are witnessing now at this moment is the rattling of the end of the, because it's not just the US empire, but it's the colonial empire, which also includes, as you rightly said, Germany, Europe, the UK especially. Do you think that what we're witnessing now is the rattling of the final stages of the colonialist, imperialist empire?
I sure hope so. I really, truly hope so, because it is wicked, and it has been wicked for hundreds of years, and it has caused so much death and destruction and devastation to so many lands and peoples for, you know, the white colonial powers to be able to profit. And it is a sick system that is still very much alive in so many parts of the world. I was in Malawi, even South Africa, and I just kept thinking and saying aloud, I thought we said that we were post-apartheid, and it's just a new form, you know, of apartheid, and it's just a new form of colonization that you see when you are in other African countries. And here also in Palestine, you know, this modern settler colonial project that is very much in a powerful moment. The settler colonial power is very strong in this moment, and it is all alive and well. And I truly, with all my heart, hope that we are at the beginning of the end, and in the downfall of the colonial moment in history, because the earth, it's not even just about the devastation to occupied Palestine or to African nations. The earth itself cannot sustain this colonialism and this evil any longer. So I know you said this is going to be your last question, but I just need to put this on record because I think it is the only important message that I can possibly give. And that is that we feel often looking around very hopeless, especially people who have gone to so many protests throughout the last year or written their representatives. But the only power that you have, the only power you have is as a consumer. And that is an incredible power. And when you come together in community and you use your power as consumers to say, we will not buy these products, it makes a difference. Or the flip side of the coin, we will buy and support these products. It makes a huge difference. And they say that that was what caused the downfall of apartheid South Africa, that boycott, sanctions, and divestment are incredibly powerful tools for individuals to engage in. So when I say that I truly hope it is the end of the empire and the end of the colonial moment, the only way that it will happen and happen quickly enough to save the earth and save all of us is by people using those tools for good. So that is the main message. It's not just this is my lived experience. It is you have a responsibility to make this a more fair and just world. And going out to protest is all good, but it's not changing anything. So use your consumer power to make that change and to be that change and spread that message.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful interview. And I hope we'll be able to speak again and have another conversation, because it's just, I didn't even realize that nearly an hour has gone by.
Yes.
There are so many subjects that we can talk about and so many things that we can touch upon. It's just endless. It's never ending. Thank you. Thank you for spreading the word. Thank you for spreading and teaching people what Palestine is really all about. I know that I've spoken to so many people that know you from social media, and they say, we didn't know. We didn't know. Now we know. Now we know. And as you said before, it might be, you might feel guilty because it's your white privilege, because of the way you look, and because you speak English very well, obviously. But that's the only way to reach people outside of the Palestinian or Arab or Muslim or Arab Christian community. The only way to do that is by having people who belong to a different community and have access to that different community to be able to spread the word, to tell people, to end the narrative of dehumanizing, because this is what's been happening in the Western world, the dehumanization of the Arab world. Suddenly, Arabs are always the bad guys in the movies and the evil people in the movies, just like the native Indians in Cowboys and Indians, I mean, in Western movies. Where you dehumanize and you create this idea that everybody who lives in this country is a terrorist, and everybody is being used as a human shield, and everybody and they're not humans. So it's okay. What we're doing to them is okay because they're not humans. You were and still are, to me, one of those voices that broke the wall down and broke the narrative. And you introduced us to Palestinian culture, to the food, to the smells, to the trees, to the flowers, to the bushes, to the birds, and all and the beautiful aspects of what Palestine is, even under occupation. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you. I hope even if I am, a door or a bridge for people to enter into Palestine, I hope they also, after that, realize there are so many amazing Palestinian voices also on social media, and they follow those accounts too, because really, that's their lived experience as Palestinians, and they should have a valued voice and be heard. I think much more than myself. So even if I act as that for people, my hope is that they enter and then they keep going through other voices.
Well, this is what Bisan did, and Motaz Azaiza, the journalists in Palestine, and so many other, Youssef Alelu, Hamza, who is not with us anymore, Al-Dadu and his dad. I mean, so many people, and the journalists that have are showing us what is going on in Gaza. Without them, we would have not known. And that's why the Israeli occupation forces and the idea for killing journalists, because they're telling us how it is on the ground. Morgan, thank you so much once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you for reaching out and including me in this. Thank you.